Hey comrades, so originally I was just going to talk about a rhetorical device called Polyptony. But when I realized this was an opportunity to talk about my favorite sentence, buffalo, 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 which I swear to God is a real sentence that means something I promise I will explain later. Well, I realized I had to talk about it. But we will see there's a deeper problem here. And really, I don't think I actually know what a word is. And I think that you will see that you don't really know what a word is either. So, first off, what even is polyptony? You know, the entire reason I started making this video in the first place. Well, I am glad you asked, comrade. Polyptony is basically a fancy word for when you use the same word twice, but with different inflections, grammatical inflections, that is, different word forms, not inflections like what you do with your voice and the tone. Now, really, honestly, this isn't very common in English because in English, our words don't have many inflections. They do not have many forms, that is to say. And you might be aware that in English, our nouns have a singular and a plural form. I can have one chair, but many chairs. And so I'm adding that S onto the chair to make it plural. It's a different inflection of the word chair. Our verbs can be present, like I walk, or they can be in the past, like I walked. Walked is a different inflection of walk, or even I can say he walks, and that is another inflection again of walk. But in general, in English, we don't change the forms of our words into different inflections very often. But if you've studied a language like Spanish, you'll be aware that in Spanish, verbs, for instance, can change quite a bit. They have different verb forms depending on who is doing something, when they are doing it, whether it was a completed action, and how doubtful you, as the speaker, are about their doing of that thing. Or even if you've studied a language like German, you'll be aware of the idea that a word might change based on whether it's doing something or having an action done to it. These are different inflections. They can even change with the gender of the word. Now, ancient Greek, from where we get many of our terms for rhetorical devices, was one such language with a great deal many inflections with verbs and nouns, constantly changing in all kinds of crazy ways that, quite frankly, only a masochist would be able to truly enjoy. But in English, there are a few examples. So, the most common way this happens in English, that we get polyptony, the usage of one word in multiple inflections in the same sentence, is very often when a word can either be a noun or a verb. Like in Poe's The Raven, it has the line dreaming dreams. So dreaming is a verb, then dreams is a noun. We actually get a third form in here, the infinitive. Dreaming dreams no mortal ever dares to dream before. So we get three inflections of the same word. So it's this kind of triple polyptony that Poe gave us. Rhetorical devices tend to make these nice sounding phrases that you might hear a lot. And so we also get phrases where sometimes it's a verb and an adverb. And one of the most famous examples would be absolute power corrupts absolutely. Personally, I was introduced to the concept of polyptony with a line from Shakespeare's Richard II, where one character starts to say, "My grace's uncle," to his uncle, and the uncle interrupts him and says, "Grace me no grace, nor uncle me no uncles." And so he's kind of making up a new verb here, making up uncle as a verb. Don't uncle me, don't call me uncle, which is rather inventive, but I'm not entirely sure if it would have counted as proper polyptony for an ancient Greek. Because when a word is being used as a verb in one place and a noun in another, I'm not really sure if these are inflections of the same word, or really they're just different words altogether with a similar origin. But actually, I was rather proud of myself. At the end of my last video, I thought to say something that I thought was very clever, but honestly, like most things on the internet has probably already been said a million times before. I said, before you go, if you liked this video, then like this video. This to me seemed like a clear case of polyptony. In the first sentence, liked is in the past tense, and in the second, when I say like this video, it's an imperative. That is, grammatically, it is a command form. These are two different forms of the verb to like, two inflections of the same word. But that isn't entirely what's going on here, honestly. The sense in which I'm using like also changes the sense, the meaning of the word. In the first sentence, it means to enjoy, if you enjoyed this video. But in the second, it's shorthand for when you click on the like button. Basically, I said if you enjoyed this video, then click the like button, which are two different actions, two different meanings. And technically, this would be a form of Antanclasis, which is when you use one word twice or more with two or more different senses, two different meanings of the same word. And we can see many famous examples of Antanclasis in quotes like from Benjamin Franklin, who supposedly said, "Your argument is sound, nothing but sound." Or Asher Roth, who said, "Time isn't wasted when you are getting wasted." But taken to an extreme, we get my favorite example, where an entire sentence is made just by repeating one word 8 times. Buffalo, 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 buffalo. I swear to God, this is a real sentence. To understand this, you need to know buffalo can mean 3 different things. It can mean buffalo, the animal, also sometimes called a bison. It can mean Buffalo, the city in New York, named after the animal and the origin of the phrase buffalo wings. In case you were ever wondering why we call them buffalo wings, even though buffalo clearly do not have wings. And we have the third usage, which is not so common. Buffalo can mean to outwit, or to hunt buffalo. I've always seen this explained to mean outwit or confuse, but honestly, I think hunting buffalo would make more sense in this case. So we get 3 parts. We have buffalo, buffalo, that is the bison from the city of Buffalo. That, we could put in a little that here to make it more understandable. That, the bison from Buffalo hunt. And then we get our third part, buffalo, 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 to hunt buffalo bison. And so if you spend enough time with the sentence, you get buffalo, 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 and it does start to make sense. But this doesn't quite feel right as a case of polyptony, or maybe even perhaps not a case of Antanclasis, because surely these 3 meanings of buffalo can't actually all be one word. They have to be homophones, that is, words that sound alike and may be written alike, but are still separate words. My go-to example for this would be bat. Bat, as in a baseball bat, is clearly not the same bat as in bat the flying animal. Now, these 2 words are pronounced and written the same way, but they mean completely different things and have separate etymologies. However, with buffalo, the words do seem to share an etymology, both the sense of outwitting or hunting someone and the city name come from the animal name. But their meanings still are very distinct. There's even a slight difference in the written form, where buffalo, the city name, is always capitalized, but buffalo, the animal, and buffalo, to outwit or to hunt buffalo, is only ever capitalized when it's the first word in a sentence, like most normal words. But I have a confusion here, because if we accept that the 3 different meanings of buffalo are indeed related but distinct words, where do we draw the line exactly between what is a sense of a word and what is an entirely new word? In my other sentence, if you liked the video, please like the video, the 2 uses of like clearly have different meanings. Now, is that enough to consider them different words? Are we creating a new word every time we use an old word in a slightly new or poetic way, or even just a slight metaphor? And what about languages with inflections that do have a lot of different word forms, with the words always changing? Are these separate words? When I say, I like this now, or I liked it in the past, or like and liked, different words. Now, what about likes? Could we say that he likes this is one word, and this video has 42 likes is a separate word, because one is a verb, he likes this, and the other is a noun, the plural. This has likes. Now, honestly, clearly I am taking this too far. In general, we as English speakers accept that like the action of enjoying and like the thing you will give to this video are different senses of the same word. No one would legitimately argue these are 2 separate words. And I think most people would agree that a word can be both a noun and a verb with slightly different meanings. I don't think anyone really has a problem with that. But let's take another example. What about locate and location? I think a lot of English speakers would say these are separate words. They are a verb and a noun, but they are both very regular and predictable forms based on the other. So if you know locate, allocate, and speculate, then you know there will also be the other words location, allocation, and speculation. But most people wouldn't consider them the same word. Now, if these two uses of like, as in to enjoy, or for something to have likes, are the same word, how could we possibly justify saying that locate and location are separate words? For me, this confusion goes even deeper. In general, languages exist on a spectrum. On one side, we have languages like English that are so-called analytic languages. That is, our words tend to not carry many prefixes or suffixes. There is normally one morpheme, that is one unit of meaning per word. Now, that can sound a little complicated. So let's take a sentence like, I will eat an apple. We can see each word is telling us one thing. I is who is doing it. Will is when it will happen. Eat is what is happening. An is indicating that the thing, the next thing, is some kind of non-specific thing, and it's only one. It's not multiple things, and it's not the thing. It's a thing. And apple tells us what it is happening to. You can see there are many words, and each word is really only telling us one thing. Now, there are other languages where a similar sentence might be said in a few words, and the words have prefixes and suffixes to indicate all the things that get their own separate words in English. So my question for you is, if we just reconsidered how we think of English and started thinking of I and will and an as prefixes, and wrote out our sentences a little differently, I will eat an apple, does this really change anything about English? Could we indeed just consider these words as prefixes? Could we write them as if they were prefixes? Now, I know someone might object because prefixes and suffixes are often not pronounceable on their own. Like, in the word liked, we can't just pronounce the past tense suffix that is that D at the end, like we can pronounce the future tense word will. So I could say, I will like, and separate it out like this, but I can't say I liked. It's pretty hard to pronounce it that way. But I would argue that many of our words aren't pronounced as single words, really. I don't say, I will eat an apple. I say, I'll eat an apple. I will becomes I'll, smoothing two words into one syllable, and an becomes unapple, not an apple, which honestly feels a little uncomfortable to pronounce that way in isolation. I don't say not connected when it's not connected to a noun, when it's not like a prefix. But there is actually an interesting exception to this kind of casual pronunciation. If someone asks me if I will eat dinner, I could say, I'll eat dinner, or I could just say, I will, without the contraction, without putting it into one syllable. It's understood that I am referring to the fact that I'll eat later, but in this case, when it stands by itself, when it is just a sentence, I will must be two separate words and cannot be the contraction I'll. If someone asks me if I will eat dinner, I can't just say I'll, but I can say I will. Suggesting there is a difference between I'll, which I would say could be really argued to basically be a prefix, and I will, which can stand alone as a sentence unprefixed onto another word. We can also play this game in reverse. Like if I say non, as in non-specific, it's hyphenated with specific, like it's a prefix to specific. The word non can never exist on its own as a word. It must always be considered a prefix. The same thing happens with un. I can say unhappy as one word, but I need to write it all together, denying un the possibility of being considered its own word. But if we did just write it out as a word, would it change anything? If we wrote, for example, non-specific, unhappy. Even if, for example, we wrote out I walked as 3 separate words, would anything in our language really change? If not, how can we say that the ed suffix isn't actually a word, or that al isn't actually a prefix? Now let's go even further and look at one of my favorite words from one of my favorite highly inflected languages, Nahuatl. That is a language with these very long words made up of prefixes and suffixes that very often contain the meaning of entire sentences. And so let's take a look at a word, Neoquitlamiki, and we can see this is how I would normally write it out. And we could even separate it with hyphens, Neoquitlamiki. And then even we could just write it as separate words, Neoquitlamiki. And so each one of these words or affixes has a meaning. Ni means I, Yol means hurt, Quitla means, quite frankly, it means shit, and Miki means die. I hurt, shit, die. It means I am pissed. Is there a difference in our conception of this word if we conceptualize it as one long word making a short sentence, or a normal-sized sentence made up of many small words? Is there actually a difference between these two ways of framing the same language? Or is our concept of what counts as a word just a convention? Does writing it out differently change how we perceive it? And is there a difference between what counts as a word or a contraction or a prefix besides how we write it? Does whoever write a language down first decide whether it's a language with long words with many prefixes and suffixes, or just a language with many short words? I would argue that the answer to this question is that there is no hard line between a suffix and a separate word, that these are purely conventions, that if you are learning a new language, you could just mentally categorize the language, mentally systemize the language as if each suffix were a different word. Or very often you could take these small grammatical words that we use all the time and imagine that they were prefixes or suffixes, and you could internalize a new language that way, without any real difference in how you would speak or understand other people speaking to you in that language. The only difference would be the spacing on the page. If you're new to this channel, basically it's a place to talk about things, mostly literature and language, but, some other cool things too. Occasionally, I even wear a green shirt, believe it or not. And if you liked this video, then you will probably like my other video on solipsis too. You can watch that over here. But before you go, subscribe now, and you might be the 100th subscriber to my channel. That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? And remember, good night, good day, good potato.